So it's a stupid debate, but for folks who want to insist that mob rule is the fear that we need to look out for, fuck off, okay? I understand tyranny of the majority, and tyranny of the majority exists as a fear when we have a fully fledged democratic system in the works, which we don't. The argument essentially comes down: is America a democracy or a constitutional republic? And I wished we were a democracy. A democracy would listen to the will of the people. If the will of the people were listened to on many issues such as war, poverty, pollution, legalization of marijuana, guaranteed income, we'd have a better country and a better nation. Unfortunately, because there is no democratic functions or forms in any area of American society, it's not the 51% who dominate over the 49%. It's the 1% dominating over everybody, since they don't need to be validated by actually having good ideas. Mitch showed the world that the theater of politics and actual governing are two completely separate things. If the majority of Kentuckians came out to vote, including the youth who have greater ideals and the poor who benefit from Obamacare, Mitch wouldn't have had a chance. But nonetheless, more than half of the 30% tyranny of ballot voters voted for their corporate imperialistic man, and the majority of the voting public got to choose those who govern over them, in quotation, because the majority, democracy would have at least seen the majority of the people show up for the polls. But we didn't see that. We don't have a democracy here, not at home, work, school, or even in our political institutions, and that's a damn shame. I wish I was fearful of the tyranny of the majority. Oh my God, 100% of the people voted, and 75% of them not only wanted to legalize marijuana, but are actually dipping into Social Security, pass out buds to everybody. That's too much. That's too much democracy. That's tyranny of the majority. But unfortunately, the majority of Kentuckians stayed home, didn't vote, didn't do anything else political. I'd rather a government be set up to where the people vote for all the issues of the state. Stop electing other assholes as if they aren't corruptible human beings who's going to fuck you over anyways. Also, the definition of republic is representative democracy. That's not a fucking debate. You said in the Pledge of Allegiance, the fucking republic, and you heard that thing with Benjamin Franklin. You know, what kind of government did you give us? A fucking republic. It's a representative democracy. It has democratic fucking influences. In fact, when we talk about giving democracy to other countries, we only talk about the election. Do we have fucking elections here? Then we have democracy here. That's a fucking democracy. Just because you don't understand the definition of democracy, a republic is a representative democracy, which is a bastardized, a lesser form of pure democracy, if you will, but the democratic sentiments are still there. So a republic is a democracy. And basically, I feel like somebody learned, well, I heard it's not a democracy, it's a damn republic, tyranny of the majority, the people gonna fucking do whatever they want, goddamn mob rule. Yeah, okay, good job, you learned yourself a fucking new concept. Now get over yourself, okay? That's just one of many fucking issues about what democracy is. Democracy is ruled by the people, the demos. And where the fuck are the people? The people are nowhere to be found. Nowhere. Nowhere. Like I said, it's not 51% dominating over 49. Name an issue that's even like that. 51% dominating over the 49. What, gay rights? Oh my God, the fucking gays are, dominating and pushing their lifestyle. No, they're not. They're saying they want to fucking live their lives in peace. They're not pushing it upon you. You're the one pushing it upon them. That would be a fucking issue that would be against the homophobes. The homophobes are the majority fucking terrorizing. So, of course, that's a tyranny of the majority exists as a fear, but it's the 1%. We don't have the people voting. We don't have the people aren't paying attention. They're not looking at what's going on. They don't care about politics. In fact, most people lose their friends on Facebook because of too many political posts. That's America. Oh, man. You got it political? Fuck your politics. I'm done with you. So, majority of Kentuckians stayed home. They didn't vote. They didn't do anything else political, right? Tyranny of the majority. Is that what you're fucking afraid of? Get the fuck out of here. Definition of republic is representative democracy. A republic is a fucking democracy. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. If you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, quit fucking a certain shit like you fucking do. Oh my God, like seriously. So for now, our lack of democracy elects a privileged elite to rule over us, and they get that position by sucking Koch brothers' dicks and usually using their campaign contributions to foist the corporate will upon our lives. Tyranny of the majority? A republic isn't a democracy? What the fuck are you talking about? Jesus Christ. And, you know, the issues that I talked about: war, poverty, pollution, legalization, marijuana, guaranteed income. Go down the line: Patriot Act, prisons. You know, every goddamn fucking thing. The people are right on the money about it. Generally speaking, I agree with the will of the people, the majority of the people, most of the fucking time. And so, if I would rather have some aristocratic dictator say this is a good idea because I say it is, versus an idea of which all the people fucking agree with, I'm gonna go with all the people over that fucking dictator any goddamn day of the week. Because for all the people to be on some board of some issue, that must mean it's a popular ass fucking issue. And so we should, you know, I'm not saying that leaving it up to the masses. I think it's up to the leaders to present the fucking arguments of the good ideas and to get those good ideas to where, you know, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, if you can't explain it to the masses, you don't even know the fucking idea yourself. If you knew the idea yourself, you'd be able to talk to the masses about it. But if you're just posing for the cameras, saying whatever it is you think that the people want to fucking hear, then, you know, you'll never be an honest fucking person that actually tells the truth or whatever. But politics, again, like Mitch McConnell, we would rather see, you know, our politicians smiling at us and fucking advertisements, acting like a family man instead of actually governing the way that they should govern. So that's that was just actually my introduction to Keynesian economics. Keynesian economics. The only two people that actually I have come across to when it comes to economics, you know, I had economics professor, I got macroeconomics textbook, and they basically just go down the textbook and say, this is what they say, and sure, it's all true. I don't know where they actually get the shit from. I don't know if it's classical, if it's neoclassical, if it's, you know, there's, I would say I have a basic understanding about macroeconomic and microeconomic systems. And so, you know, just textbook fucking knowledge. But textbook is what? Who the fuck writes these damn textbooks? And when I was writing my great books list, I think I need to start putting some textbooks on the fucking thing because, you know, whoever wrote good shit about electricity, whoever wrote good shit, eventually turns into a textbook, and then you gotta pay fucking $200 for the goddamn thing. So, you know, it should be worth fucking why are we paying $200 for something that isn't even the basic of what the fuck ever? Anyways. Great books is about us educating ourselves, and so the Milton Friedman and John Keynesian. So we got Keynesian and we got Milton Friedman, and so Milton Friedman's pretty badass. I remember he was being mentioned in some classes. But Milton Friedman, the effects of capitalism and freedom were, let's see, one thing he talks about is a negative income tax, where everybody gets a guaranteed minimum income, a guaranteed minimum income. Everybody gets $10,000 just for fucking existing. That cures poverty, allows people to spend how they wanted to spend it. It helps the economy, it helps poverty, and you know, the current measures are misguided and it's inefficient. So this is a fucking incredible, smart idea. You said the flat income tax is happening in Estonia, Slovakia. Floating exchange rate almost fully replaced the Bretton Woods system, and the national school voucher systems in Chile and Sweden, to cite a few prominent examples. So school vouchers in Chile and Sweden, Sweden being one of the biggest, you know, Scandinavian countries that's kicking ass, and we should do the best of what the world's offering. Qatar, Suriname, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, they have incredible high producing GDP per capita. Why? Some of them just sitting on fucking oil, and so it's easy to fucking do that shit. But some of the other ones, it's all about like kissing the financial industry's ass, right? Switzerland has all the banks, you know, you can fucking hide all your damn money on it, so it helps them. So I don't know, Sweden, there's lots of things that they're doing. I think they just have, there's some fucking country that actually has a philosopher. They have paid a philosopher just to talk about the issues of the heart and the mind and what matters. And they actually pay for his philosophy, and they actually want to know what it is that he thinks about, you know, this and that, in order to be able to, you know, I don't know, to govern properly, right? This is what he thinks in these matters, and then you can consider if that's fucking good or not. I think that's incredible. I don't know who the top philosophers are. So, you know, when it comes to the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, 50 best books of the 20th century, that'd be something, you know, and then the list of 100 best non. I'm gonna check out all these fucking book lists actually, to be honest with you, because Milton Friedman and Keynesian economics are the only two I'm looking at. And Kinsey, he says that we should have a guaranteed minimum income. Where the fuck is it? He's supposed to be like the Tea Party darling or whatever, but he's more loved and venerated than Ayn Rand is, or Ayn Rand and Keynes, John Maynard Keynes. Richard Nixon had the big quote, "We're all Keynesian." Kane. His name is, it looks like Keynes, but it's actually Keynes. So Keynesian, we're all Keynesian now. So Keynesian is, where the government can influence the economics of the system by having jolts to the system. By adding jolts, they can get the thing going, but then they got to step back. And so he, when he wrote his book was the general theory of something or another. He changed the whole fucking game. He changed, become Keynesian economics. And it was after he wrote The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, published in 1936 during the Great Depression. Keynes contrasted his approach to the aggregate supply-focused classical economics that preceded his book. The interpretation of Keynes that followed are contentious, and several schools of economic thought claim his legacy. So, let's see. Keynesian economists often argue that private sector decisions sometimes lead to inefficient macroeconomic outcomes, which require active policy responses by the public sector. In particular, monetary policy actions by the central bank and fiscal policy actions by the government in order to stabilize output over the business cycle. So the monetary policy and the fiscal policy, those two things. What are we doing with the money? And how are we spending that money once we make it, once we fucking print it off? And so there's monetary policy, fiscal policy, and I don't know. Somebody says if somebody actually understood what America was doing, they'd be pissed off the day after and be revolting. So, I heard 95% of our economy is speculation. So, Germany is fucking producing, has a high export rate or high GDP rate, which is what you're supposed to have. Kentucky, is like number 28 in the country and like number 51 in the entire world. And so there's things that we could do that would be better off if we all knew about Keynesian and Milton Friedman, if we had discussions about who was better and who wasn't, and we actually, talked about economics. That would actually require us to value people's thoughts and intelligence, and that they are, worthy of discussion. But if you think you're a dumb shit and you just do as you're fucking told and you don't value your thoughts and you don't value your mind, then it will never fucking progress anywhere. And unfortunately, I don't know, that seems to be the top 10, 20% of the intellectuals that know what's going on. Get them on board, and then you can get everybody else on board. So Keynesian economics is the view that in the short run, especially during recessions, economic output is strongly influenced by aggregate demand. So especially during recessions, he's saying that you can have greater aggregate demand, and that'll help people, get back to work. He was saying that the classical models, it says that in the long run, it might be better, but in the long run, we're all dead. So, or do we want an economic system that just sets up by itself and makes sure, some fucking people are making it? No, everybody needs to, have a good life right here in the now. So sometimes they have self-correcting mechanisms that might take generations, right? No, let's try to fucking fix this shit now. We're all Keynesian now. That's what Nixon said. I mean, Nixon, I used to think that history started after the French Revolution. I'm starting to think it happened after fucking Nixon. Nixon, he held on, man. He was like fucking Ali, or not, like rope-a-doping with Ali, right? He's just fucking hanging on there. But that's, because he keeps coming back, and he seems fucking reasonable compared to these goddamn Republicans today. Bush was worse than Nixon, and so all these assholes are fucking worse than Nixon. They're psychos. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. Nixon at least tried to appeal. He passed the EPA. He got us out of the Vietnam War. Nixon did a lot of fucking shit in the short time that he was there. But, America was in a weird time. They want to fucking just hate the motherfucker. And, he was a creepy fucking weird fuck. It made sense what he was to be against that fucking weirdo. But it just sucks that when I look at the Republicans today, Mitch McConnell and company, I look back in nostalgia for Nixon, a man I never even fucking knew about. I never lit. I was born in '82, so he was done with his fucking shit, by the time I was birthed, right, by the time I received life. So aggregate demand, in the Keynesian view, aggregate demand does not necessarily equal productive capacity of the economy. Instead, it is influenced by a host of factors and sometimes behaves erratically, affecting production, employment, and inflation. Keynesian economics served as the standard economic model in the developed nations during the later part of the Great Depression, World War II, and the post-war economic expansion, though it lost some influence following the oil shock and resulting stagflation of the 1970s. The advent of the global financial crisis in 2008 has caused a resurgence in Keynesian thought. So Keynesian thought, I mean, that's fucking genius. The advent of the global financial crisis in 2008, a resurgence in Keynesian thought. So, 2008, casino-style gambling, we about blew up the fucking world. So just, allowing the rich to do as the fuck as they want. I think that's like more Adam Smith type style, maybe. I don't know. But the fact that they're coming back to him after Nixon already declared him, you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? Where did we go from? We went from Keynesian to say what? If Milton Friedman's talking about a guaranteed income. Well, how come we don't have a guaranteed fucking income? So we're not doing what the fuck the right or the left or anybody's doing. Who the fuck was? I need to figure out who the fuck is the economic advisor. I guess it'd be what, the Federal Reserve Chair? That's the man. Who the fuck is the Federal Reserve Chair now? Does he know what he's doing? Who does he study? Who's his man? Where did he get his fucking, just the fucking professors and shit and his own idea? This is good information. I gotta find out who is the leading economist in America. And who does he listen to? Where does his ideas come from? A fucking textbook? And then very, very well, all college was taught through textbooks. Fucking corporate owned, Pearson, fucking, Higdon, what the fuck ever. I don't know what the names were. But they owned all the books. Basically just three main companies owned all the fucking books. And they used to fight. There was a guy, William Justice Goebel, who fought against textbook monopolies. So anyways, that's Keynesian resurgence. In 2008, 2009, there was a worldwide resurgence of interest in Keynesian economics among prominent economists and policymakers. This includes discussions and implementations of economic policies in accordance with the recommendations made by John Maynard Keynes in response to the Great Depression, most especially fiscal stimulus and expansionary monetary policy. That's totally what Barack Obama did. Fiscal stimulus, we had a stimulus package, and then monetary policy. From the end of the Great Depression till the 1970s, Keynesian economics provided the main inspiration for economic policymakers in Western industrialized countries. The influence of Keynes' theories waned in the 1970s due to stagflation and critiques from Milton Friedman, Robert Lucas Jr., and Friedrich Hayek, and other economists who are less optimistic about the ability of interventionist government policy to positively regulate the economy. From the early 1980s to 2008, the normative consensus among economists was that attempts at fiscal stimulus would be ineffective even in a recession, and that such policies were only occasionally employed by the governments of advanced nations. In 2008, a rapid shift of opinion took place among many prominent economists in favor of Keynesian stimulus, and from October onward, policymakers began announcing the major stimulus packages in hopes of heading off the possibility of a global depression. By early 2009, there was widespread acceptance among the world's economic policymakers about the need for fiscal stimulus, yet by late 2009, the consensus among economists began to break down in 2010 with the depression averted but unemployment in many countries still high. Policymakers generally decided against further fiscal stimulus. With the end of the brief consensus for Keynesian policies, but with the neoliberal policies that characterized the Washington Consensus era still viewed by many as discredited, several commentators have predicted that the macroeconomic domain will see a return to ideological struggles. So, Keynesian, I feel like Keynesian has fucking served his fucking place. If anything, I don't think he's left or right. I think he's like fucking moderate. Milton Friedman, Robert Lucas, and Friedrich Hayek. I'm not familiar with Lucas and Hayek. I am sort of familiar with Milton Friedman, and I don't hate Friedman. So I think if you read Keynesian and you read Friedman, I think you actually get a pretty wide spectrum of types of thoughts, and then you can probably come up with some shit there. So in terms of economics, I would say those are the only two books it seems like that people would actually need in order to actually learn anything. Keynesian, here's the general theory within one fucking paragraph, right? So here's his general theory. And it's just like fucking Albert Einstein, the special theory versus the general theory. So he called this book The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, placing the emphasis on the prefix general. The object of such a title is to contrast the character of my arguments and conclusions with those of the classical theory of the subject upon which I was brought up and which dominates the economic thought, both practical and theoretical, of the governing and academic classes of this generation, as it has for 100 years past. I shall argue that the postulates of the classical theory are applicable to a special case only and not to the general case, the situation which it assumes being a limiting point of the possible positions of equilibrium. Okay, so I'll actually say that point again because it's important. I shall argue that the postulates of the classical theory are applicable to a special case only, not to the general case. So classical theory can only work for here and there, but for the general times, he's got something better. The situation which assumes being a limiting point of the possible positions of equilibrium. Moreover, the characteristics of the special case assumed by the classical theory happen not to be those of the economic society in which we actually live, but the result of its teaching is misleading and disastrous if we attempt to apply it to the facts of experience. So he's got a general theory for fucking economics. What's your general theory, fucking professor? Where'd you get your fucking ideas from? And actually, the way that people have interpreted actually sort of like classical and Keynesian was sort of a combination. Macroeconomics is Keynesian, but microeconomics is classical, some shit like that. So the you know, there's been some sort of melting and, you know, ebb and flow of how people thought about this. I remember actually reading a little bit about this, about how the Keynesian economics, it takes into account, because the Great Depression had happened, that there was a lot of people that was out of work. Now, the economy doesn't just create jobs. It doesn't just make, you know, it doesn't make jobs. It's supposed to have a self-correcting mechanism, but there's supply and demand. How do you get, you know, a good job? You got to create the demand and then you fucking supply it, right? You can do something like that. The mafia does that shit all the time. Go around breaking windows and then go around repairing it. If you're a fucking firefighter, you burn houses down and you go, you know, put them out. And that's criminal activity. But you could also just, you know, market some fucking idea that you think is phenomenal, and then bam, look, I got a company that's making all this type of stuff. Or just advertisements, you know, that's what marketing and advertisements even is. So the modern day Coca-Cola and Pepsi, they sit there and say you must have one or whatever. People feel like they got to fucking get one. The demand has been created, and then they go get it. So, you know, how can you study supply and demand? That's like the crux of fucking economics, right? Supply and demand. When you have a bunch of, okay, so I raised a shit ton of tomatoes, okay? So I got tomatoes all over the field, and everywhere, you know, all the tomatoes that a person could ever create or raise in a couple acres. So I have a shit ton of fucking tomatoes. Now, just because I have a shit ton of supply, does that mean I'm going to be rich? No, I got to sell it somewhere. And what if everybody else were, you know, raised tomatoes? What would the demand be? Where could I sell these, you know, tomatoes at? They're only good for a certain amount of, you know, a certain period of time. So I'm only got, you know, the selling season is only like, you know, a certain amount of time. So, you know, I think we got to really think outside the box here in supply and demand, because there's so many factors that actually go into each one of them. You know, everything in economics is really estimation and guesstimation and sort of, you know, just in general. Even the GDP, the thing I want to mention about the GDP is, while even though I make fun of it, there is an idea behind the GDP. So if you make a bunch of, say, go with that tomato theory, right? That's a high GDP if I make a whole shit ton of tomatoes. But necessarily doesn't mean I'm going to make money, but because if I continue to produce a bunch of stuff, maybe I'll find markets. Maybe, you know, producing a bunch of shit doesn't mean that your standard of living in the country is actually a good thing. It doesn't say anything about the standard of living, but the idea is, if you're in a country where there is producing massive amounts of stuff and exports and, you know, a product, if they're producing a bunch of stuff, then eventually all the other indicators kind of crawls up towards it. So it's not, one doesn't necessarily lead to the other, but many times that they do. So that's why the GDP is a good indication of, you know, economics and whether or not we know what we're doing. So he postulates the classical theory is applicable to a special case only, not to the general, the situation which assumes being a limiting point of the possible positions of equilibrium. And so therefore he's saying he has a brand new fucking theory. Fuck the old case. It only works a little bit. Classical theory. He talks about the classical economist was a name invented by Marx to cover Ricardo and James Mill. and their predecessors, but he also says that it's J.S. Mill, Marshall Edgeworth, and Professor Pigou. So this is the beginning of the fucking theory of Keynesian. We've talked about Keynesian. Why don't you actually read this fucking book and see what you find out? That's the good thing about. I'm not very happy with my 2015 great books list, to be honest with you, because I feel like it did have my initial character, but my initial character was sort of to rebel against my own fucking parameters and to, I used a lot of books and stuff that I had already read, so it came from previous knowledge, and I want to assemble it real quick. So it served its initial purpose for 2015, but the 2016 great books list of the Freedom School is going to be more about, what are the best fucking, sort of cornerstones of society, and this would be one of them, the Keynesian fucking economic theory. There's one man coming up with all this shit. We probably should listen to some leading economists and stuff, and then eventually, it's hard to say which book to venerate. I'm not saying he's 100%, but I'm also not discrediting him like he ain't shit either. I would say Milton Friedman and Keynesian books side by side. I think that would be you would have a good range of what the biggest debates in the economics has been about. And there's lots of specific details that I know I'm not even getting into. I watched Khan's Academy. He explained Keynesian economics pretty well. From what I could tell, I don't fucking know. He draws the fucking diagrams pretty well, and he does them pretty quick. So he seems like he knows what he's talking about. And if you really want to get into it, I think you should draw the models and follow along with Mr. Salman Khan. And Mr. Salman Khan, I want to put him as a great book, but he's not really a book, but he has a fucking theory of life, and he is providing all these free educational lessons out to the fucking world. And it's probably what's inspired me to sort of do my thing versus, I don't know. I think I got an individualistic approach to this because I myself have been learning whenever I, do a sort of podcast. It's all, just words and you're listening to it. It's also, I think, more entertaining too. You can chill out and just kind of listen to what the things I'm talking about versus actually but he talks to specifics, and the specifics, you can't, the fundamentals, right? Yeah, we got to learn the fundamentals, and if you learn the fundamentals, then the discussions become a little bit easier. But we all got to learn the fundamentals, and if we all don't learn it, then who the fuck you talking to about this shit? I know about economics, I'll sure you do. Shut your fucking mouth and get back to work, you fucking cotton picking fucking slave, you picking ninny. The postulates of the classical economics, most treatises on the theory of value and production are primarily concerned with the distribution of a given volume of employed resources between different uses and with the conditions which, assuming the employment of this quantity of resources, determine their relative rewards and the relative values of their products. That's another big fundamental theory of economics, right? There's scarcity. There's only a limited amount of resources. There's people have unlimited desires. So how do you fulfill people's desires with only a scarce amount of resources? In theory or in reality, you can't, because desires are unlimited. But I think you can provide the basic fucking, life necessities. So Milton Friedman is, it's incredible when you hang out with a bunch of fucking assholes. You could say, you could speak with the brilliance of George Carlin or Bill Burr or Sarah Silverman or Dave Chappelle. You could come off with a good joke, a good idea, a good questioning authority type of a snippet, but fucking assholes, instead of laughing or, acknowledging that you got a fucking point. They would rather, you're stupid. Okay, that's good. That just shows me that a fucking Einstein could be born to these fucking assholes and they wouldn't know it because they're too busy sitting there pounding the fucking Bible over their fucking head, telling them to act, just like their fucking parents act, but don't be violent, right? Do what I say and do as I tell you to do, but don't go around hitting children. I'm only I'm allowed to hit you and nobody else is. So ha ha. Like, wow, that's fucked up shit, man. I thought the slavery was legal there, man. Nobody has a right to own me, man. I'm my own motherfucking person, man. Wage is equal to the marginal product of labor. So we're getting into some specifics now. So don't want to do that. No. Just I want to understand Keynesian economics is just about the fiscal stimulus. You could also stimulate the economy by cutting taxes. That's what Bush famously said. He was more of a supply side economist, right? Because George Bush knew all about the fucking economics. He doesn't know shit about it. That's why the 2008 fucking, explosion happened. But neo-Keynesian economics can be summarized as Keynesian in macroeconomics and neoclassical in microeconomics. So neo-Keynesian economics, right? So they basically, he wrote his thing. He said it was a general theory, but then people kind of worked out the details. So, it's like a piece of aluminum foil. You try to get it all smooth, but there's a couple kinks that sort of need to be all smoothed out. That's not a good fucking analogy, but you know what I mean. It's sort of, let's say a better way. You make something and then you need to make it a little bit better to get it fucking right. I guess it's like my great books list. I don't know. It could be like anything. So what? Something that could improve. So your skills in basketball, right? So you could be a pretty good player, but you could also work harder and become better, right? So I don't even know why do we even need a fucking analogy here? Yeah, you understand what I mean? He wrote the fucking book. It's not fucking perfect. They try to make it a little bit better. And I think that he wrote it, in 1936 during the Great Depression. So that was, that's something, right? So yeah, Keynesian economics. We're all Keynesians now, and we are all Keynesians now since the 2008 fucking collapse. No, casino style fucking capitalism, letting rich people do as the fuck as they please, has not worked out. There needs to be some type of interventionist policy, even if it's just, to go in and to go out. The stimulus package, we only saw it happen once. I was hoping that it would happen again because the stimulus package did create a lot of fucking jobs and new ideas, and people were excited about what it was doing. So, the stimulus package was a fantastic fucking idea. Bailing out the banks, not so fantastic. We should have given the money to the people. But we don't seem to do that. We give the money straight to the fucking banks, and we give, I don't know. There's money out there, right? There's money in channels and shit. Frankfurt and Washington, D.C. is giving somebody fucking money, and I think block grants is what they do it, so they give them like a fucking chunk of money. Hey, here's $100,000, make sure you spend it all the way you're supposed to. Okay, man. So, Keynesian economics. Yeah. It's a good intro, I think. What do you think?